Rossi versus Lorenzo. This one had everything you need for a loss that still gets talked about with extra heat. Valentino Rossi came into 2010 as the face of Yamaha, the 9-time world champion who dominated the sport for over a decade. Then Jorge Lorenzo showed up, young, hungry, and absolutely refusing to play second fiddle. The tension was real from day one. Lorenzo wasn't there to learn from the legend. He was there to beat him. And in 2010, he did exactly that. Lorenzo took 8 race wins to Rossi's 2. The championship went down to the final round in Valencia, and Lorenzo sealed it with a third-place finish, while Rossi could only manage 7. The points gap was just 23, but the psychological damage was massive. This wasn't just any teammate beating Rossi. This was the student surpassing the master on the same machinery, in the same garage, with the same data. Lorenzo's consistency was surgical. He finished on the podium 16 times out of 18 races. Rossi, meanwhile, struggled with the shoulder injury he'd picked up the year before, and it showed. His qualifying pace dropped. His racecraft was still there, but the raw speed wasn't clicking anymore. What made this loss satisfying for some wasn't just the upset. It was watching the changing of the guard happen in real time. Rossi had been the king for so long that seeing him outperformed by his own teammate on identical equipment was a reality check. No excuses about machinery, no complaints about tires being designed for someone else, just pure head-to-head racing. And Lorenzo won. The paddock politics made it even better. Yamaha tried to keep things neutral, but the garage was split. Crew members picked sides. The media ate it up. And when Lorenzo crossed the line in Valencia and dropped to his knees in tears, it wasn't just a title celebration. It was a statement. The Rossi era at Yamaha was over. For fans tired of one rider dominating the narrative, this was the perfect twist. A young gun with ice in his veins taking down the most popular rider in the sport on the same bike in the same team. No asterisks, just results. Marquez versus Ducati. This wasn't just a loss. This was a reality check delivered at 350 kilometers per hour. Marquez came into Phillip Island with 6 premier class titles and a reputation for being untouchable at certain circuits. Phillip Island was supposed to be one of his tracks. Fast, flowing, commitment required. The kind of place where his aggressive style usually pays off. But this time, Ducati had other plans. And by Ducati, I mean all of them. The race turned into a Ducati parade. Bagnaia, Bastianini, Marini, Miller, red bikes everywhere. Marquez was riding a Honda that hadn't been competitive all season, but he still pushed like he had a shot. He ran off track trying to chase them down. He fought back, made passes, and clawed his way into the mix. But every time he thought he had something, another Ducati would roll past him on the straights, like he was standing still. He finished 5th. Not terrible on paper, but the gap to the winner was massive. More importantly, the visual was brutal. 4 Ducatis ahead of him, and he couldn't do a thing about it. The bike just didn't have the pace. What made this satisfying wasn't seeing Marquez struggle. It was watching Ducati finally dominate him after years of watching him bend physics on the Honda. For so long, Marquez had been the one pulling off impossible saves and winning races he had no business winning. But at Phillip Island in 2022, there were no miracles. Just a faster bike, better engineering, and a rider who couldn't close the gap no matter how hard he tried. The straights exposed everything. Honda's horsepower deficit was undeniable, and Ducati's top speed advantage was suffocating. Marquez could still brake later, carry more corner speed, and ride on the edge. But it didn't matter. The Ducatis just walked away from him on every straight. For fans who wanted to see someone finally out-engineer Marquez instead of just outriding him, this was the perfect example. No controversy, no contact, just pure performance inequality. And for once, Marquez was on the wrong side of it. Stoner versus Pedrosa. This one stung because it was entirely self-inflicted. Casey Stoner came into Saxon Ring on a mission. He'd announced earlier in the season that 2012 would be his last year in MotoGP, and he wanted to go out with another title. He was fast all weekend, dominated qualifying, and looked like he had the race under control. Then, lap 2 happened. He made a mistake, ran wide, lost the front, crashed out. Just like that, 25 points gone. Danny Pedrosa inherited the lead and rode a perfect race to take the win. The frustration was visible. Stoner sat trackside for a moment, helmet still on, probably replaying the mistake in his head. This wasn't a mechanical failure. This wasn't another rider taking him out. This was just him pushing too hard too early and paying the price. What made this loss satisfying to some was the narrative flip. Stoner had spent years complaining about other riders making mistakes and causing chaos. He'd criticized the level of riding in the championship. He'd called out what he saw as reckless behavior. And then, here he was, throwing away a race win on his own. No one to blame but himself. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Pedrosa's win was clean, calculated, and mistake-free. He didn't have to fight anyone. Stoner handed it to him on a silver platter. And for a rider who prided himself on precision and consistency, that had to hurt more than any mechanical DNF. The championship implications were huge, too. Stoner was trying to chase down Lorenzo in the standings, and this mistake put him further behind. He'd go on to finish the season third overall, and this crash was one of the key moments that cost him a shot at a second Honda title. For fans who appreciated humility and thought Stoner could be overly critical of others, this race was a reminder that even the fastest riders make mistakes. Sometimes, the biggest enemy isn't the competition, it's yourself. Quartararo versus Bagnaia. This was a tactical masterclass that exposed every weakness in Yamaha's 2023 package. Fabio Quartararo came into Barcelona knowing he needed a result. The season had been rough. Yamaha had fallen behind in development, and the bike was struggling everywhere. But Barcelona was supposed to be better. He qualified reasonably well. He got a decent start, and then reality hit. Bagnaia on the Ducati just rode away from him. Not in a dramatic, high-stakes battle kind of way, just a slow, methodical, demoralizing pull that left Quartararo with no answers. Every lap, the gap grew. Every sector, Bagnaia was faster. Quartararo pushed as hard as he could, but the bike wouldn't cooperate. He finished a distant second, and it wasn't even close. The gap at the flag was over 6 seconds. 6 seconds. In MotoGP, that's an eternity. What made this loss satisfying wasn't schadenfreude toward Quartararo. He's talented, and everyone knew the Yamaha was the problem. But it was satisfying in the sense that it confirmed what everyone already suspected. Ducati had built a machine so superior that even a reigning world champion on a factory bike couldn't touch them. The performance gap was undeniable. Quartararo's post-race comments were telling. He didn't make excuses. He just said the bike didn't have the pace. And that honesty made the loss even more stark. There was no controversy to hide behind. No bad luck. No tire gamble gone wrong. Just pure, measurable speed difference. For fans who wanted validation that Ducati had built something special, this was it. And for those who appreciated Bagnaia's methodical, mistake-free riding style, watching him dismantle a former champion without drama was deeply satisfying. No theatrics, just dominance. Vinales versus Mir. This one was chaos wrapped in disappointment. Maverick Vinales had been fast all weekend at the Red Bull Ring. The Yamaha was working, he was confident, and he looked like the favorite going into Sunday. Then, the red flag started. The race was stopped after a horrific crash involving Johann Zarco and Franco Morbidelli. Bikes went flying. It was terrifying. After a delay, the race restarted with a shortened distance. Vinales got a good jump, but he couldn't pull away. Joan Mir on the Suzuki stayed close, patient, calculating, and when it mattered, Mir made the pass and held it to the flag. Vinales finished second, and the frustration was written all over his face. This wasn't a race where he got beaten by a faster bike. This was a race where he had the pace but couldn't convert. The restart changed everything. Tire temperatures, rhythm, strategy, all of it got reset, and Vinales couldn't adapt. Mir, on the other hand, thrived in the chaos. He stayed calm, stayed close, and executed when the moment came. What made this satisfying was watching Mir outthink Vinales. Suzuki didn't have the raw speed Yamaha did on paper, but Mir rode smarter. He conserved his tires, he picked his moments, and when the race came down to the final laps, he had more left in the tank. For fans who appreciated intelligence over raw speed, this was a textbook example. Vinales had everything going for him, but Mir's patience and racecraft won the day. And in a season where Mir would go on to win the championship with only one race win, this race showed exactly how he did it. Consistency, intelligence, and ice-cold execution under pressure. Vinales had the speed, Mir had the win, and that's what mattered. Rossi versus Gibernau. This is the one everyone remembers. The past, the controversy, the grudge that never really healed. Valentino Rossi and Seta Gibernau had been battling for supremacy all season. The tension was already high after the drama in Qatar earlier that year, where Rossi controversially benefited from a penalty that cost Gibernau a win. Now they were back at it in Jerez, trading paint in front of Gibernau's home crowd. Final lap, final corner, Gibernau was leading. Rossi dove up the inside, made contact, forced his way through, and took the win. Gibernau ran wide, lost momentum, and had to settle for second. The crowd erupted, but not in celebration. They were furious. Gibernau was devastated. And Rossi? He celebrated like he'd just won the championship. The pass was aggressive, borderline dirty, depending on who you ask. And it broke something in Gibernau. He was never the same after that day. His confidence shattered. His results dropped off. And Rossi went on to dominate the rest of the season. For fans who thought Gibernau got robbed, this loss was painful. For those who loved Rossi's ruthless win-at-all-costs mentality, it was legendary. But here's why it belongs on this list. The satisfaction came later. Not in 2005, but in hindsight. Because that pass marked the moment where Rossi's rivalries started turning ugly. The mind games, the politics, the grudges, it all escalated from here. And for fans who grew tired of Rossi's antics in later years, especially the drama with Lorenzo, Marquez, and others, looking back at Jerez, 2005 feels like the origin point. The moment where winning wasn't enough. It had to come with destruction. Gibernau's career never recovered. Rossi added another notch to his legacy, and the sport got a reminder that sometimes the most satisfying losses aren't about justice in the moment. They're about understanding the cost of victory years later. Marquez versus Rossi. This wasn't just a loss. This was a meltdown broadcast live to millions. The championship was on the line. Rossi was chasing his 10th title. Lorenzo was right behind him in the standings. And Marquez? He wasn't in championship contention anymore. But Rossi was convinced Mark was helping Lorenzo by slowing him down. The paranoia had been building all week. Rossi accused Marquez in the press conference. He said Mark was interfering with the title fight. The tension was nuclear. Race day came, and Marquez immediately started battling with Rossi. Aggressive passes, close racing, too close. Lap after lap, they fought while Lorenzo disappeared up front. Then it happened. Rossi ran Marquez wide. Contact. Marquez went down. Rossi continued. The penalty came swift. Rossi was forced to start from the back of the grid in Valencia, the final race. His championship hopes were basically over. Lorenzo would go on to win the title by just 5 points. What made this loss satisfying had nothing to do with the crash itself. It was watching Rossi's composure completely unravel. For years, he'd been the master of mind games, the psychological warfare, the media manipulation, and here he was, falling victim to his own paranoia. Marquez didn't need to help Lorenzo. Rossi beat himself. The accusations before the race made him look desperate. The move on track made him look reckless. And the penalty made him look guilty. For fans who'd grown tired of Rossi getting favorable treatment from race direction and the media for years, this was poetic justice. No amount of popularity could save him from the consequences of his actions. The FM didn't bend. The penalty stood. And the championship slipped away. Marquez lost the battle on track, but Rossi lost something bigger: his composure, his reputation for fair racing, and ultimately his shot at a 10th title. For those who believed Rossi had gotten away with too much for too long, watching him implode under pressure while blaming everyone else was deeply, deeply satisfying. The greatest mind game player in MotoGP history got played by his own mind. Lorenzo versus Marquez. This was the coronation nobody expected. Jorge Lorenzo came into the final race of 2013 at his home circuit in Valencia, still with a mathematical chance at the title. It was a long shot. Marc Marquez only needed to finish in the top 4 to seal his first Premier Class championship. But Lorenzo had momentum. He'd won 3 of the last 4 races. The pressure was on the rookie, and for a moment, it looked like something special might happen. Lorenzo got the perfect start. He led into turn 1 with the crowd on their feet. Marquez slotted into second, riding cautious, riding smart. He didn't need to win. He just needed to finish. And that's exactly what he did. Lorenzo pushed as hard as he could, but Marquez stayed glued to his back wheel. Every time Lorenzo tried to pull away, Marquez responded. Not aggressively, not desperately, just efficiently. The gap stayed around half a second for most of the race. Lorenzo was giving everything, throwing the bike into corners, riding on the absolute limit. Marquez looked like he was on a Sunday cruise, managing the pace, hitting his marks. When they crossed the line, Lorenzo won the race. Marquez finished second. Championship over. At 20 years old, Marquez became the youngest Premier Class champion in history. What made this loss satisfying wasn't about Lorenzo's performance. He rode brilliantly. He won the race. But it didn't matter. That's what stung. Watching a legend give everything he had in front of his home crowd, taking the victory, and still watching a rookie lift the trophy. The visual said it all. Lorenzo on the top step of the podium, looking exhausted, exhausted and defeated despite winning. Marquez next to him, spraying champagne with a world championship secured. For fans who loved seeing the new generation take over, this was the perfect passing of the torch. Lorenzo represented the old guard, calculated, consistent, professional. Marquez represented the future, fearless, fast, inevitable. And no matter how hard Lorenzo fought, the result was already decided. The race win was a consolation prize, a beautiful, hollow consolation prize. Lorenzo got the trophy for Valencia. Marquez got the one that mattered. And everyone watching knew that MotoGP had just entered a new era, whether the old guard was ready or not. The satisfaction wasn't in seeing Lorenzo lose the race. It was in seeing him win it and realize it still wasn't enough. Sometimes the most brutal losses are the ones where you do everything right and still come up short.